back with Masters of the Air, Debrief, Episode 5.
What an episode.
What an episode yet again. I feel like every episode is what an episode because they're just doing such a good job.
No, they really are. They're doing a good job from like everything from, the music to the pacing to just the look of despair in the characters' eyes. Like, they're just doing a really good job.
Yeah, nailing despair is a positive accolade I didn't think that we needed, but you know what? You're right. They're doing a good job at that.
They're doing a good job.
This episode opens on just a great shot. If we're just talking about cinematography, just an amazingly well-planned shot. Bucky sitting out there smoking a cigarette inside of a B-17 at dawn. And then the news comes. Sergeant Ken Lemons, who's played by Rafferty Law, by the way, son of Jude Law. Huh. The whole time I'm watching, I'm like, man, this kid is a dead ringer for Jude Law. If he needs a Looper-style movie, don't let me feel like a fool and be like, oh, duh, it's his son.
That's funny.
Either way, it's a sad beginning that Bucky's back from his vacation, his PTO, and he's ready to go out there and bomb. Either way, just a beautiful way to kind of set the scene and remind us just how dire it's about to be.
Yeah, you can kind of tell off the bat that like Bucky's attitude towards this is he's starting to get pretty cynical. Like his friend is missing in action. And you can just kind of tell throughout this episode that like everyone's running really thin. They're running thin on planes. They're running thin on pilots. Like, there's a moment where, someone is like, well, we just barely ran 2 missions like 2 days in a row. How are they expecting us to keep? Aren't we supposed to like be having like replacements come in? And they're like, who's going to replace us? And so you can just tell that like everyone's kind of being worn thin and like it's really starting to get to everyone.
Yeah, and even with some of the good moments and the positive reveals, it's just a sad and somber episode. Still fantastic, but it definitely has that darker tone. I mean, Crosby has a voiceover where he's talking about Buck and he says, if Gail Clevin couldn't make it, how would any of us? And I love that idea of like having your own personal heroes within your bombing company or your group. And then seeing someone go down would be heartbreaking because you see them as Superman, right?
Yeah.
It's just, yeah, that's a rough, a rough line. Even though Crosby is alive, we thought he went down. Well, they did go down in the last episode. But the idea that his crew, with Blakely at the pilot seat, that they're alive, but they did lose Saunders.
Yeah.
And everyone's congratulating Crosby, Harry Crosby, greatest navigator in the 8th Air Force, to kind of get them out of there and get them to a safe drop spot where they can get back home. But it just is a sad, sad way to come back to see your lockers cleared out and everyone thinks, oh, you're dead. We're ready to send everything home.
Not only were we ready to send everything home, we were ready to send a letter to your wife telling her that you were dead. As Crosby, his friend Bubbles told him before they leave on their next mission. And Crosby is promoted to group air navigator. So he's doing for everyone what he was doing for his plane, which is, a good kind of win, a small win in the middle of it. And, there's a good scene with Crosby where he's received the promotion and he asks his commanding officer, like, are you sure I'm the right guy for this? And his officer's like, yeah, I don't know if you're the right man for this. And it's just like, you got promoted because you're the one here. Which is, yeah, there's just realness in it. It's not like he got promoted because he was the best at what he did. It was just because he was survived. He was alive.
Yeah, it's that desperation over inspiration kind of thing of you've proven yourself that you can do this and you're alive, not that you are the absolute best of your job. Which seems to be the theme of, I think, the rest of the series is they're hanging on by a thread, and the fact that the U.S. was just production line, just getting people out there, planes out there, crews out there, where, thinking about now, I remember when I was a kid, not knowing what to do, and I was like, oh, maybe I'd be an Air Force pilot. the strict criteria of 2020 vision, not airsick, this height, this size, you can't be too tall for your plane, all these things where they didn't have those criteria back then. They were like, are you alive? Can you breathe? In the plane you go, buddy.
Yeah, we're looking for warm bodies, and not that Crosby was a warm body, because clearly over the handful of episodes so far, he's demonstrated himself to be a phenomenal navigator, and so like
Yeah.
he definitely can do the job. But I think the narrative is just showing that people are falling into roles because they're alive
Yeah.
and they haven't been killed yet and they haven't shot out of the sky yet, and so they kind of get filtered into these roles because they're just there.
Now, that said, I do think it's impressive to watch the series and then hear from his daughter and otherwise that he did have to rise to meet this moment and to be better and to really take charge and be command, which he does. And in further episodes, we're
Yeah,
going to see some of the missions he leads that are pretty phenomenal as far as tactical. And for this episode, the next mission, they have an attack on East Munster. And the U.S. Air Force has told the 100th Bomb Group they're going to bomb in the middle of the city center and that accuracy was important. They only have 17 planes they can muster to send. What a terrible mission to be assigned to.
honestly, yeah. It just goes back to like you can just see the despair in people's eyes. And especially the takeoff scene for this one, I feel like a lot of the takeoff scenes in the previous episodes, there's a lot of triumph and excitement that's going on while the planes are taking off into the sky. But this one, there's like an apprehensive or hesitant dread that's underlying the scene, because it's just like everyone here on all these planes knows what they're getting themselves into, and the music really does a good job of like kind of building the tension as the planes are getting into the sky, of just like no one here wants to be going on this mission at all, and everyone is afraid of what's going to happen, because thus far we've all seen planes fall out of the sky like snow in a cloud of shrapnel, and these boys are apprehensive about going on any more missions.
Yeah, and especially before they get in the planes, there's a moment where Bucky and everybody are putting their jackets on and tying up their boots and getting ready to go out there. And Crookshank, or Crankshaft, says, you saw how close the cathedral was to that drop zone. And we're going to hit it midday, right as everyone's coming out of Mass. And the idea of like not only the morals, but the common sense kicking in to say, this might be wrong, what we're doing
Yeah,
right now, even in the terms of knocking out this telecommunications center and disrupting all the trade and travel within the valley. And it's a strategic moment. But still, the guys in these planes are like, well, wait a sec. We shouldn't be bombing right next to a civilian chapel right during Mass. It's a tough one. And of course, Bucky says, Jesus Christ, Frank, it's a war. We're here to drop bombs. This won't end until we hit them where it hurts. It's better now before every guy you ever shared a bunk with is either dead or MIA. It's that desperation of like, he's
yeah,
lost Buck. We're just going to bomb him until they'll stop because if not, none of us are going to be left.
yeah. And you can really see that kind of cynical pessimism setting into Bucky throughout the episode. When they're in the sky, and the way that he's engaging with the other crewmen above or on the plane, and you can kind of see that this has become personal for him. Not only is he kind of drained of some hope or like bravery and courage, but he's also really sad because his buddy is missing in action, and he's kind of looking for some vengeance and some payback.
Yeah, and Crookshank specifically mentions no one we're bombing today shot down Buck.
Yeah,
And there's this moment of like, who's the real enemy slash how do you ever get that piece of vengeance if such a thing exists?
yeah,
That he's not going to be bombing whoever actually shot down Buck. It's just going to be somebody else this time. And it creates that vicious cycle that war always creates of you create extremists and haters. Haters, that's too common of a word. You,
you're creating haters right and left.
you create the animosity while trying to complete the mission to end the evil, and it's just a big old cycle.
Yeah,
Either way, this this is the scene that I had mentioned, I think, in last episode of They're walking by all the busted planes and just trying to find ones that are going to work. They've only got
Yes.
17 and they're like, oh, patch this, patch that. That probably doesn't work. It's like going to a CarMax lot in in a small town. Everything's got a problem or an issue. So we
Yeah.
do see for the first time as they take off a P-51 Mustang escort. This is the first time that the US finally had fighter planes that could cross the channel and escort them at least a little bit into Germany and
Wow.
then turn back around. So yeah, fun to see those in action. Well animated or CGI'd, if you will,
Hmm.
but also sad when they leave and you feel the desperation and the hope disappear of, well, there they go.
Yeah.
And it's back to just dust.
And boy, is it back to just them, because once the flak starts, like, there's only 17 of these people, or 17 of these planes, and they just start falling out of the sky. They just start falling out of the sky. They're losing their engines, especially the plane that Bucky is on is like, it's almost as like a good narrative structure of like, you lose one engine, you lose two engines, three engines, and like, I don't know if they can do any more. And so it's almost like a countdown to something fatal happening. It's just more kind of horrific shrapnel, face blowing off kind of scenes.
There's a moment where Bucky finally lets go of his pride and agrees they need to bail out. And so one engine gone, two, three. One of the gunners is gone. The whole entire back, the tail, everything's just going wrong. And he's like, okay, fine, we're going to bail. He hits the switch, trying to get out, finally bails out in his parachute. And then a Nazi Luftwaffe fighter plane fires on him in his parachute, which is, first off, totally against the rules. And as soon as I looked up that, it was horrifying to hear about midway through the American campaign into Western Europe that started happening. And you would track, and these pilots would know about this guy was just shooting our people out of the air in parachutes. Okay, I'm going to do it to them. And then you just have this massive parachute, ballooning out all these pilots where it should be like, okay, okay, take them hostage. No, they would just start peppering each other and blowing
Wow.
them out of the sky.
Wow. It's crazy to think that there's rules
Yeah.
in war.
Especially now, I think like post Vietnam, where we're like, oh, everything's
Yeah.
guerrilla warfare. People are in Adidas tracksuits and they might be a target, or at least that's how the American military treats them.
Yeah.
Where it was a little different then. It wasn't Revolutionary War, line up and look at each other, but it
Hmm.
still was, especially among the Air Force and pilots. There was a respect there of your job is done, just get captured.
Yeah.
The fact they were shooting them out of the sky is not great.
Yeah. So Bucky, he crash lands, or doesn't crash land. He parachutes down behind enemy lines. But then there's one B-17 left that makes it out of the flak and makes it out of the danger zone after they've dropped their bombs. And there, I remember the scene where the pilot is asking all the turrets, all the gunners, like, what do you see? Do you see anyone? And they're all like, no, we see no. Everything's negative. We don't see anyone. And it just dawns on them that they're the only ones left out of the entire bombers group. And then more German fighter planes come in to attack them. And I think this was a cool scene, because not only does it like show how insane it was that you lost 90% of your squadron, but also it was a little bit like a dogfight, because when these planes are in formation, the B-17s aren't actually, like, they're not moving around because they don't want to run into each other. But when there's just one left, that the pilot is like, okay, well, I'm going to start helping the gunners out, and by maneuvering this thing so that we can get some of these other, the enemy pilots in our sights better. And it was very engaging thing to watch.
Yeah, I mean, it's piloted by Major Robert Rosenthal, Rosie, who we got
Mhm.
introduced to last episode. It's it's like watching a bus fight a bunch of sports cars in Fast and Furious almost. You're just like,
Yes.
wait
Yeah.
a second. No maneuverability or very terrible maneuverability. You've got your couple turrets, and yeah, these high-speed fighters are right behind them. first off, would have been scary just to think of everyone else is gone. You got no one going. And my other question is, how are they not landing these P-51s and sending them back immediately to go fight or to help escort them back? They just don't do it.
Yeah.
Anyway, the feeling of hope is completely lost. And
Yeah.
the fact it's only Rosie's third week and he's the only plane to return and watching Bucky go down and everybody else, just scary. Scary to think about that.
Yeah. Yeah, I know that scene where Crosby's on the air tower, and they're trying to count the planes that are coming back, and it's just like it's the one plane that's coming back is just, kind of it's hard to watch.
It's definitely hard to watch. And that's why I think the interrogation they go through afterwards, which I'm already glad that they up all the mechanics earlier in the season to tell us what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
But to have Rosie and his crew sit at the table with the airman, the general, whoever he be, as he's like, and when did this plane go down? And when did this plane go down? And when did this? And you have to recount 16 other planes going down and live through it right after you've landed. I get it for accuracy and statistics, but that must have been pretty terrible.
Yeah, especially when they don't know. They don't have answers to those questions. So they're just like, no notes, no notes. We don't know when this happened. It just did. We don't know how many parachutes came out of this thing, because I'm sure that there's some guilt that these characters are feeling for, some survivor's guilt for being the ones that lived through it, but also as if they could have done more for, their fellow airmen, but nope.
Nope. And the episode with Crosby reading the letter that Bubbles wrote to Crosby's wife, assuming he had died, because now
Mm-hmm.
Bubbles had gone down on one of these planes and there's no way he made it. And it's pretty strong, even without it just being, it doesn't feel forced. It feels like what would have actually happened, you know? Just crazy to think of guys in their early to mid 20s writing poetic tributes to their friends off to their wives and then them dying before the ones they're writing it for. And he's reading it. Just heartbreaking.
Yeah, it's insane.
Well, we hope things will change next episode, but knowing the war and having watched more, they don't. Um,
Yeah.
but best luck to Bucky, who we'll catch up with next week. And we hope everyone enjoyed the interviews that we've got on this episode and the ones upcoming. And tune in next Monday.
Perfect.